everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt. With me again, as usual, is the man who gave a Valentine's Day card to his wife this year that said, "I lager you," Mr. Bobby Fleshman.
It was on a sweetheart candy. Yeah.
Back again on the show, the returning champion, Carrie Guerin, level 1 Cicerone. And I think achieving level 1 Cicerone allows you to use the title Dame.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
But you don't get a tiara.
Maybe with my level 2 if I get that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And the guy we're going to have as a guest on the show, but I guess you're just going to kind of be on the panel here today. Aaron, introduce yourself, because I haven't gotten ready. I didn't know you would be here.
Hello, my name is Aaron Reimers, and I am one of the brewers here.
And you've shaved. You're not full Duck Dynasty.
Well, I'm it's coming. I'm working on it.
We got a great guest today. He's the author of many books, but for the purpose of this episode, he is the author of the upcoming book, Your Tasting Brain, A Sensory Approach to Wine, Beer, and Other Pleasures. And he's done a whole lot of stuff in the beer industry. Please welcome Randy Mosher. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Where are you coming from?
Chicago.
Oh, so you're in the neighborhood.
Yeah, in the neighborhood. 3 hours, I think, away.
So you've written many books dealing with beer and brewing. Mm-hmm. And your upcoming book it seems a little broader.
Much broader.
So what was the genesis of it? What led you to write it?
Well, I thought I had another book or two in me, but I didn't really have anything that I thought needed to be said about beer at this point. And, I don't know that you could really write a interesting book about seltzer and all that stuff. So I wasn't going to do that. And I had started giving talks called Beer Tasting as a Path to Self-Awareness, just as kind of a jokey thing. But, my point was, if you actually pursue tasting, you learn an awful lot about the human mind and the human body and everything else, human genetics and, all kinds of stuff. And so I realized at some point, it's like, that is a book that needs to be written, but it doesn't want to be a beer book. It needs to be much, as you say, much broader and cover really everything you'd want to smell, drink, taste. It covers both how we do that and also some basic information about the flavors that are in the things that we love to taste, like beer, like wine, like spirits, a little bit about food, like chocolate, coffee, tea, some things like that towards the end. So that was the genesis. And then that was in 2018, and then we started shopping it around, and in 2019 we got some offers, and we decided to go with the University of Chicago Press. And we were looking for an academic publisher because we wanted that weight behind it, And so this is a fully footnoted. It's not an academic book. It's a book of what they call a trade book, but it is. I read 5 million words of scientific papers to do the research on this.
So, Randy, I was going to bring that up. Your background, you're not a scientist by training, right?
No, not at all.
You dove deep on this. From even what I've seen, I haven't been able to see the full text, but yeah, I've seen some figures and some nods to all the different sciences.
Yeah. Well, I just had a lot of questions. I've been pursuing beer and involved with a brewery here in Chicago called Forbidden Root. We have one in Columbus, Ohio. Also, I was involved with a Latin brewery startup called Five Rabbits Cerveceria. That's, I think, on hiatus now, maybe coming back at some point. So, and also involved with teaching classes at the Siebel Institute and, really trying to be a good taster and really understand how to do that and judging beer at GABF and things like that. So in addition to homebrewing and homebrew stuff and homebrew judging, I just have been pursuing it, but I didn't really have what I thought was really the background in it. And so I just thought, well, if somebody needs to write this book, and it has to be a fool like me, because I just jumped into it like, oh, I could do this. And then 4 months after starting work, I finished work on the chapter on taste. I thought, wow, that was really hard. Mouthfeel ought to be a lot easier. And then I got into mouthfeel, and it's like, holy crap, this is really complicated. We have millions of years of evolution. Some of this stuff, these receptors and the things that we work with they go back to the beginning of life. There's not a creature on the planet that has ever lived that does not have some kind of chemical sense. That's the most fundamental sense, because if you're drifting around the ocean, a tiny little microbe, you got to find food and you got to avoid danger, right? And how do we do that? We do that with sensory apparatus. So I learned a lot about evolution. I learned a lot about the genome. I really just, like, every single question I could possibly think of, I just dove in and got the papers and started reading it and banging my head against the wall. And, sometimes there were some things that were so complicated, I had to make diagrams of them. I had to, like, make a picture or make a diagram just so that I could understand kind of the structure and function of things. So, because I've spent a career as a visual artist. That's really my main profession. Writing was kind of a sideline. It's taken over, but that's my training and my expertise is design. So I use that in my books, as you guys know, but I always try and have a lot of visual content because I think it's really helpful. And I think certainly for sure, some people are more just learn better that way. And so to have both words and pictures really helps, I think. So it certainly was a tool for me to just figure it out for my own sake. So, and to be able to then explain it to other people.
We're all inquisitive by nature from the beginning, and you seem never to have lost that. I admire that. I'm a physicist gone brewer at some point.
Yeah,
I had
that's
to dive
cool.
in.
Yeah.
Had to dive into the chemistry and microbiology, and I went to UC Davis and did all of that.
Oh man, yeah.
So are you? I don't mean to take a negative turn here, but is Siebel? Is it now in Canada? Is that right? Is that
well? So the Siebel's parent company is in Montreal.
okay? Yeah,
and it's kind of a complicated story, but early, like in the back in the heyday of American beer, Siebel had people from all, like, Anheuser-Busch and Miller and all the big breweries, and there were a lot of them back then. There were Schlitz and Pabst and Blatz and a lot of little regional breweries, and that was Siebel's stock and trade. And then at some point, the big guys, that all got consolidated, and then the big guys decided, well, it's a lot less expensive and easier for us to just do our own training. So a lot of that stuff stopped. But then, of course, right about that same time, craft brewing really got going. And then they were, now the craft brewing, in terms of new people coming into it and people wanting to take classes to become brewers, there's less demand for Siebel, and they had been relying pretty heavily on people from Mexico and Brazil and elsewhere in mostly Latin America, but also a little bit from Asia. And, the immigration madness that's going on in our country and the extreme vetting of people coming in to go to school, even a brewing school, they're requiring people to send in their passwords to all their social media account to let the immigration people poke through those and see if they can find subversive content. So people are just, like, freaked out. They see what's happening in the U.S. and they're freaked out, even without all that intrusiveness, and just worried that they'll get in and they'll get arrested, or they'll won't be able to get in, and then they've lost their money and their plane ticket. And so there weren't enough people to run the class this year in the U.S. And so they decided to run the class in Montreal instead. So, but that means that there's not really any use for the very expensive Siebel facility that the last president of Siebel put together. That was a pretty big burden in terms of rent and everything. So, it was very sad, very sad. I mean, that company started in 1877.
right.
Right. It's a 150-year ongoing business in Chicago. We're going to run some classes. I'm going to still do my professional beer styles and tasting class here. I think there'll be some activity here, but we'll be doing it in breweries and things like that. But it's a shame to see that all packed up and go away. It's really a loss for Chicago. And it was really, Siebel was a big nexus for people in the brewing community, and they would occasionally just say, "Hey, anybody wants to come over? We're pouring beer at the tap room," and just, like, hang out with the brewers and things like that. So it was a great thing to be associated with, and I'm still associated with it. But we're trying to see how it's going to all shake out. But it was definitely
moving forward with that. Are you and Ray Daniels affiliated in the education sphere, or?
Yeah, we started doing a class at Siebel, and then so we worked on a shared knowledge base basically, and
Yeah.
he took the shared knowledge base and he started Cicero with it, and I took the knowledge base and I wrote tasting beer with that because that was a class before it was a book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's why it reads, it's very logical and it kind of progresses from one thing to another, covers everything. And Ray and I are great friends, and he's been really helpful in a lot of different ways, and we share a lot of commonalities, and we had great fun in Chicago here, being involved with the Chicago Beer Society, which is one of the country's oldest beer appreciation groups, and one of the few that's not really a homebrew club. It's really a beer appreciation society that's generally run by homebrewers. But we do a lot public events, picnic, beer and food, like we would call the brew pub shootout. That's a beer and food event. Tasting in the fall, a real ale festival. We've done a bunch. We've done lager fests and IPA fests and all kind of different things. So I did my time and I'm not that involved in it anymore. But we're coming up on our 50th anniversary for that. So that's a pretty big deal.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So yours is required. Yours and Ray Daniels, Jamil Zanishev, John Palmer. Those are required reading for anyone getting into craft beer or just appreciation of beer. So I was just saying I'm a big fan of you and what you've been able to put out there. Carrie, to my right, is our first hire. She's a first level Cicerone, and she knows your book. I don't want to say front to back, but she's a big fan, and we're all trying to keep up with what you're printing.
Invaluable resource for me.
Thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
I know I read the first edition on a Kindle when I lived in Boulder, Colorado, walking around town about getting hit by cars in the process. But it was good from the beginning. There was something I was thinking about. I saw you give a talk down at the Wisconsin Brewers Guild meeting a few weeks ago.
Sure, yeah.
And I think you were talking about, and I don't want to put this in the context of COVID, but it applies anywhere, but people losing their ability to taste one flavor or another. And you were talking about that not being permanent. Can you guys speak to that and what that neural pathway repair or whatever maybe looks like?
Yeah, it's generally not permanent. I mean, it depends. It's person to person. There's a lot of variation. Some people get it back really quick. Some people, you basically have about 400 different types of olfactory receptors in your nasal epithelium right in here, and the nerves from those all pass through little tiny holes in a bone. And then they go into an extension of your brain called the olfactory bulb. And that's really like a little bit of it's kind of like if you're familiar with audio signal processing, it's like that, but for smells. So it's reducing noise. It's averaging signals. It's rationalizing intensity levels. It's completing imagery. It's separating multiple images. So it does a lot of things that you would think of as like it's just signal processing, and those nerves that go through the bone, your receptors can die with extreme infections. Viruses really can mess with those things, and so you've got to really. Now, fortunately, that is one part of your brain that actually grows back. You're constantly renewing cells in your olfactory bulb. You're constantly renewing olfactory neurons, because they're actually dangling out there in the mucus in your nose. And so they're very, very tiny, very thin. So they have a lot of surface area to handle a lot of receptors, but they're really fragile and it's a rough environment. And so they die they get replaced every 2-3 weeks. But the good news is they get replaced every 2 or 3 weeks. So if you get a bad respiratory infection, they'll grow back. An issue for some people is that when they grow back not in their correct wiring, right? Because all these different receptors, all the same types of receptors are sort of like a telephone switchboard. All that one type goes to a certain area, and then another type goes to another area, and then they start that through that processing thing and then into the brain. And so if they get scrambled, you have to relearn. Right, so the relearning process is basically take up a cup and put orange juice in one and put like garlic in one and put, pick mint in one and put strong smelling things that are really different and smell those a few times a day and do that for a few weeks. And every now and then, mix it up and try some different things. And, you just have to like work on it and train on it really, essentially. It's like training to be a taster, but you're doing it kind of from zero, right? So you're trying to get your brain to rewire to recognize these things and create, those neurons, the response that the neurons have create a pattern that's like a picture, and the brain looks at it, but the brain doesn't actually take in all that chemical response information, the pattern of response that we have to an odor. We only use that for an image that we look at to recognize something. And after we do that, that information about which receptor responded to which chemical, the brain can't deal with it. It's too much. It's too complicated. It doesn't have the processing power. Very, very cumbersome. So at some point when it enters the brain, it's about meaning. It's about value. It's about context. The brain translates this chemical pattern and basically tags it with meaning. And that's what you do when you become a taster, is you build up those index cards, those tags that are attached to the odors. That's what we learn. That's what wine people learn. They learn, left bank Bordeaux, right bank Bordeaux, cold, like a dry season, a wet season, a late season, an early season. They learn that. We don't do that with beer. We do styles. We do breweries, so we have different tags that we put on them. But the ability, humans are really good at this. They're really good at categorizing. They're really good at creating these tags. And so, but anyway, things come back scrambled sometimes when you get over an infection. There's actually one phenomenon. It's called dysosmia. And there's actually one kind of well-known phenomenon that a lot of otherwise pleasant things, especially roasty things like coffee, chocolate, they actually smell literally like crap. So they smell like feces, and they think it's some sulfur compound that's created by roasting that may be the thing here that's getting misinterpreted. But so that's a fairly common thing. It seems weird as hell, but
that may explain a lot of mistakes I've made in my life.
Yeah, it applies to a lot of things, but anyway, that's just like, but yeah, you just stay on it, and it's the same with anything. You can, nobody is a born taster. There are no really genuinely super smellers.
You were talking about that when you spoke a couple weeks ago too, how women are more sensitive generally, but it doesn't sound like it's by much from what you say.
It's not dramatic. It's not dramatic. Women, it's always dangerous to generalize.
Sure.
But statistically, women are more engaged with smell. Generally, they're people that smell the roses, perhaps, or whatever. If you look around at breweries that have a sensory program, it's most often it's a woman doing it. And generally women have a little bit better command of language than men. Now, that's on average, and everybody's different. So I don't want to.
Have you met Nicole Ernie by chance, who worked with Ray Daniels?
I know Nicole. I know Nicole. I haven't seen her for a while, but yeah, I know.
She's all about
attaching
the vocabulary to these experiences happening inside of our brains that you're talking about.
That's what we have to work with, right? I mean, smell's mysterious. It just feeds us. It doesn't go through the thalamus, the thalamus is like the engine of logic in our brain and reason, and not really reason, but it has an up and a down and a back and a front and a left and a right. And all the other senses go through the thalamus because the brain wants to know, where am I and what am I doing and what's around. But smell has none of that information. Smell is imprecise in time. It's imprecise in space. The thalamus doesn't have any purpose for it. But because it doesn't go through it, it just squirts raw data right into our limbic center, into our memory and our emotional centers. And so that's why it has this feeling of weird power, And so we have this sort of thing I call the inner taster. And that is basically, it triggers memories without any conscious effort. sometimes really extremely and weirdly and whatever, but those are always correct. You never want to ignore one of those things. My wife, I've got her trained to not censor herself and really listen to that inner taster. And we were at a champagne tasting a couple of years ago, and she picked up a glass of champagne and swirled it and said, horseradish. It's like, well, that's kind of a weird thing to think about a wine, right? But it turned out that that wine was a little corked, so it had a little bit of that musty character, and there was something in that grape that had a little bit of spiciness. And if you put spicy and musty together, what do you get? Horseradish.
Yeah.
So that was her clue, and you gotta just learn to be open and learn to sort of parse those out. And
My wife Allison unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but one of her favorite sayings is that taste is the most honest conversation we can have with ourselves. And
yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. But we don't often. You know, it's really like really being open to those messages that come in. You have to learn to not use words until you have figured out what the feeling is and what the scene is, because they're quite often those odor memories have places associated with them. So if you can, are you at grandma's house? Are you in a candy store? Are you like where? If you can figure out where you are, then you can kind of mentally look around and think, well, yeah, that's banana candy, then that would be a Hefeweizen. So.
Over to my right is Aaron. We introduced him at the beginning. We're calling Aaron our flavor baron these days with 2 A's on the baron. He's been playing around with a lot of stuff back there, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on what you've been doing and get the synergy of this. I call it the ratatouille effect, where you combine 2 flavors and you get something. X plus Y doesn't equal Z. It doesn't come out the way you expect.
It's absolutely non-linear. Yeah.
But I don't know if you want to talk about what you do, Aaron, back there.
I love playing in the experimentation with the flavors and trying to come up with something and figuring out how to achieve that flavor. Bobby has been great. He has allowed me much more freedom as I go along. In the beginning, my materials that I could play with were small. Now I'm getting to the point where he keeps letting me get things, so I'm running out of space.
It kind of looks like I imagine Young Frankenstein, where there's all the stuff and the formaldehyde, and there's the Abby normal brain back here.
We need the Jacob Ladder thing going with it.
Yeah. That's right around the corner from here is my little flavor laboratory.
Yeah.
Because Forbidden Root, we consider ourselves a botanical brewery, so we do a lot of work with different kinds of botanicals and floral botanicals, and I don't know, all kinds of interesting stuff. And I make the house vermouth for them, and I make a tonic mix, and we've just done an Amaro, which we're pretty excited about. And on Wednesday, an old friend of mine's coming over, and we're going to recreate a German Jaeger liqueur, like a hunter's liqueur that's sort of like one of those German herbal liqueurs. So we're gonna try and put that together. So those liqueur herbs are pretty fun to work with. Email me, man. I'll send you some pages of these French textbooks that have recipes for vermouth and stuff like that, chartreuse, and all kind of stuff that's really fun to play with.
What was the cider combination you came up with a week ago? It was blueberry plus, was it cardamom?
Yes.
Unbelievably random in any case.
Yeah, we did some blueberry. It just needed something else, and we landed on cardamom. Put that into it, and it just completely changed it, rounded it out, and just
freshened it up. It was something it's hard to put your finger on it. And we're back to that flashcard conversation.
Yeah. And it's different, just not something that we were getting you see a lot of. Another one we did our light beer, our State Street, added cucumber into it, and it was okay, but once we added basil with that, man, it just exploded with
There's
flavor.
The green. I mean, the flavor scientists talk about green aromas, grassy. aldehydes, generally the chemicals, but grassy green flavors, and those flavors do build on each other, right? If you get cucumbers, kind of, it's not very intense, right? It's sort of like kind of lightly vegetal, a little bit green. It's definitely aldehydic, as the flavor guys would say, but man, you put something people can recognize, and it just, that makes perfect sense. So there's so much synergies to be played with and worked with, and a lot of it's unpredictable. But the more you do, kind of, you get a feeling for things.
I'm comforted in feeling that maybe it's so complicated that it might stay ahead of AI. I don't want AI to take over everything and predicting what would be the best, right? I think that there's got to be a human hand involved. I still want to believe that.
Well, they are working pretty hard on AI flavor stuff, but
sure.
I don't know, does AI understand emotion? Does it actually understand anything? First of all,
I just want to say for the record, for any future AIs that read a transcript of the show, that I fully support our AI overlords.
On record.
I have a question that I've always kind of wondered.
Yeah, sure.
In the world of wine,
yes,
there is this perception. You see these wine tasting events, and people will swirl it around, and they'll sip it, and they'll smell it. It's like, there's tastes of almond and wet socks and all these different things.
Sure.
And I've even seen documentaries with actual sommeliers who really had some impressive abilities. Like one guy got it down to, he kind of guessed, but he actually got the vineyard in South Australia that a particular wine came from, and he drank it blind.
Yeah.
That impression, or that kind of, legendary tasting status, doesn't seem to appear in the world of beer. Or at least it's not in the popular consciousness, that you don't see people swirling their beer around, tasting it, and giving all these different adjectives to what they're tasting. Is it because, is that just sort of something that's been fabricated in society? Is it something actually there, that there are more various tastes in wine versus beer?
Not that.
What do you think explains it?
Well, not that last thing.
Okay.
Fabricated by society, yes. I think that's like you're onto something there. It's an old gentleman's game. Adolphus Busch had a $200 bet at the turn of the last century that you could not pour him a glass of wine that he couldn't identify. And he
just
never
identify
was.
Like the variety, the varietal of the grape, or
the grape, the region, whatever. It was great. It was wines, I think, that he had at his club restaurant, but he had a couple hundred wines there. Right. So it was a lot, and he could pick the year because he knew he could figure out what the year was, and he never lost a bet. So it's and I talked to some sommeliers, and there's some really interesting people in that world, and not everybody buys the bullshit. But that tasting thing, they feel like they want to be able to do that because that's just the best way for them to vet people and force people to just go on a really, really, really deep dive. It's on its surface, it doesn't make any sense because that information is on every label, right? So you don't need to know it. But if you think about, and I think the fundamental difference between wine and beer, wine is definitely not more complex. In fact, they don't even know what complexity is. It's impossible. It seems simple to define, but it's absolutely not definable. But beer has more different things in it, because we have fruitiness like wine does. We have kind of some weird off flavors that wine also has, but we have cooked flavors, which wine generally doesn't, except for Madeira and sherry, and some of those fortified wines have some Maillard, some cooked flavors to them. We have hops. We have terpenes. We have like at least 800 different terpenoids, which are those spicy to, well, really like floral to citrusy sort of characters that hops are bursting with. So we have terpenes. Wine has a little terpenes in like Riesling and some of the what they call aromatic wines, but they're a minor player in wine flavor. But wine is expensive. It's hard to describe realistically. Even people who are in the business cannot recognize wines from descriptions, even if they wrote the descriptions. Right? So it's very hard to verbalize it. So there's a lot of things that, just in my own opinion, wine as an industry does to flummox people and make them intimidated so they will spend more money. And sommeliers are one of the tools for that. You go to an expensive restaurant and they got a wine list and it starts at $100 a bottle. You don't want to blow that. So you're going to talk. You're going to talk to the
simpler product.
What's that?
To me, it seems wine is a simpler product. For the most part, most wines are made from grapes grown at a single vineyard. There are blends, but a brewery, how many different hops could you conceivably, how many different malts? I mean, the sheer number of variations
and how they're treated,
of things you could do.
Yeah, and fermentation and brewing processes, all of that. Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's more complicated to make beer because it doesn't even start with the brewer. It starts with the maltster.
Right.
There's nothing in the equivalent in processing of grapes. They harvest them, they crush them, and there's some different ways of treating them during post-crush, but and into making wine, but it's less steps.
And to Gary's point, it feels like it's a marketing. It's how they branded themselves as an industry. It's not what it is per se, but it's seen as this romantic, and it's agriculturally based in their marketing. You're standing in these vineyard in these fields of grapes, and the beer industry has tended to not be that up until maybe recently.
Beer also has to be fresher. You're not going to pull out a 1948 bottle of Budweiser and sell it at a premium. It's probably going to be awful.
But I've had old beer.
And that's going to wrap up this episode of Respecting the Beer. If you want to get a hold of Randy Mosher's new book, Your Tasting Brain, it comes out May 15th through basically every major platform online, so be sure to check the links in the show notes to pre-order now. Be sure to join the Facebook group to stay connected between episodes, and support us over on Patreon, where you can get access to uncut episodes, exclusive beer, and special event invites. Links to everything in the show notes. The show is produced by me, David Kelso, with music by Sarah Lynn Huss. Until next time, please remember to respect the beer.